Hari Om. We can get started.
सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावतीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति। गीता ध्यानम्। ॐ पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितं पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्धदामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणी। नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे पुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्रा येन त्वया भारततल्यपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयप्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोक्ता गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत्। वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं। भीष्मद्रोणतटा जयद्रथजला गान्धारनीलोत्पला शल्यग्राहवती कृपेणवहनी कर्णेन वेलाकुला अश्वत्थामविकर्णघोरमकरा दुर्योधनावर्तिनी सोत्तीर्णा खलु पाण्डवैरणनदी कैवर्तककेशवः पाराशर्यवचः सरोजममलं गीतार्थगन्धोत्कटं नानाख्यानककेसरं हरिकथा सम्बोधनाबोधितम्। लोके सज्जनषट्परैरहरः पेपीयमानं मुदा भूयाद्भारतपङ्कजं कलिमलप्रध्वंसिन श्रेयसे। मूकं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयति गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवम्। यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुवन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदे साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदे गायन्ति यं सामगाः। ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तं न विदुः सुरासुरगणा देवाय तस्मै नमः देवाय तस्मै नमः देवाय तस्मै नमः
Hari Om. So happy Teachers Day today. A number of you wished. Thank you for that. Happy Teachers Day. And I've also been told to speak about Guru Upasadhana. Guru Upasadhana means that when you are able to recognize that you need guidance, you need coaching, you need teaching, and you need to learn. And with that recognition, with that awareness, approaching one's teacher is called Guru Upasadhana. And today, with that prayer of Guru Upasadhana, let us approach Bhagavan Sri Krishna. Let us approach Sri Vedavyasa and all the teachers of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Swami Chinmayananda, because of whom I am able to share these learnings with you. Swami Tejomayananda, Swami Ramanujacharya. And let's start chapter 4 today. And thanks to all of you, like I mentioned, earlier also in the group, thank you. Because of you, I also learned. Actually, because of you, I learned, which is bigger than learning from you. So it's like, not feeding, but learning how to cook. So thank you all for that. So we are now going to begin chapter 4. And chapter 4 is the yoga of renunciation of action in knowledge. Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga. But before we get into chapter 4, let us do a quick recap a summary recap of what all we have done till now. So chapter 1, we saw that it presented the nature of samsara. Samsara can be perceived as the world in which we live in, the cycle of life and death, the beginningless, without beginning, without any solution, the solutionless cauldron that we are all part of. And all of this stems from the aspect of aham and mama, I and mine. And Bhagavan introduced this as swajanam, or rather later on in chapter 2, Bhagavan talked about swajanam. And swa is mine or my, janam is people, my people. And that is what Arjuna was first afflicted with when he went into the middle of the battlefield and he looked at who all were facing him as opponents, as people he had to fight. Though he went there thinking that I want to inspect and I want to see who are these people who have the courage to fight with me. Once he went there, he got this feeling of swajanam, my people. And the minute that sense of my and mine entered him, he came under extreme sorrow and became deluded. And when that happens, when that sense of I and my prevail, objectivity gets lost. And when objectivity is lost, then you lose your efficiency. We saw that Arjuna started trembling, he had sweat, his hair was raising on his, on its end. He could not hold his bow and arrows, and he dropped all of his weapons. Like they say in Hindi, hatyar chhod deta hai. And he sat down in the chariot. He could not even stand. He was trembling. And that objectivity loss leads to such a nature of a person, which then results in obviously efficiency loss or zero efficiency and prevents the person from doing his or her duty. So essentially, sadness and delusion, when they get in, because of that sense of I and my, they lead to a major problem. And that is a inner virus that we must recognize. So the takeaway that we had from chapter 1 was watch for shoka and moha. And if you recognize them, if you recognize sorrow and or delusion, get rid of them, remove them. Was the takeaway from the first chapter. Chapters 2 started with Bhagavan giving Arjuna a dressing down. He blasted Arjuna for being like that, a famous, well-known king trembling and sitting down in his chariot. And then after a little while, Arjuna submission, where he bowed to the Lord and he said, "You are my teacher. I bow to thee. Please teach me. Please take me to the path of learning and to the path of performance." And then followed the entire wisdom that is captured in the Upanishads in summary form. Like we had said earlier, chapter 2 is summary in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita. And the wisdom in terms of what? In terms of the nature of the self and devotion to the Lord. That is what Bhagavan enumerated. Though in chapter 2 itself, Bhagavan talks about devotion only in one verse. He also brings, as a contrast to Swajanam, he brings in the concept of Swadharma. Swadharma. Dharma means duty. And Swa is my. What is my duty? And he says that Swadharma cannot be performed to perfection if there is that concept of Aham and Mama. Because Aham and Mama leads to Shoka and Moha, and that leads to Swadharma Paripalada, which essentially means, Paripalada means what ought to be there but is not there. So the duty that ought to be done but it's not being done, which is nothing but dereliction of duty. And our takeaway from chapter 2, following through from Arjuna's question, where he says that, how is it, who is this person of stable nature? And Bhagavan, when he responds, he says, the takeaway that we got from that was maintain equipoise in extremities. Samatvam yoga uchyate. That was our takeaway from chapter 2. And in chapter 2, Bhagavan presents the obtaining of the state of steady wisdom as the yoga and a method to obtain the solution to Arjuna's problem. That is what he presents. In addition to this, Bhagavan actually gives an instruction to Arjuna to perform Karma Yoga and distinguishes two aspects of Karma Yoga, which are the attainment of Atma Vidya and Swadharma Vidya on the one hand, and Bhagavan presents it as Sankhya Yoga, and the perfection of action on the other hand, that Bhagavan presents as Buddhi Yoga or Karma Yoga. Buddhi Yoga is another name for Karma Yoga. In chapter 3, Arjuna gets clarity on why and how should he perform Karma Yoga. And we saw that Karma Yoga is nothing but doing all actions with Ishvara Arpana Buddhi, which is submission to the Lord, and receiving all the results with Prasada Buddhi, which is nothing but a sense of equanimity. And Bhagavan gives instructions and teachings on how to perform and why to perform this Karma Yoga to Arjuna. And when this Karma Yoga is performed as prescribed, as Bhagavan has prescribed, and the obligatory duties are conducted as per the prescription, then this person attains that stability and ultimately attains liberation. And why should Arjuna do this? Because for Arjuna, action is superior to inaction. Because he's still not capable of absorption, being in an inaction state or inactive state, absorbing, meditating, because his mind is not in that state where it can focus and dwell deeper into himself. So that is the reason he needs to perform Karma Yoga. And when Bhagavan says obligatory duties, also called Niyatam Karma. Niyatam Karma comprises of two types of karma. Nitya Karma, which is the regular duties, sleeping, waking, eating, those kind of aspects. And the Naimittika Karma, which comes out of Nimitta. Nimitta means occasion. Occasion means the role that we have to play in our life, the position that we occupy as various roles that we have in our life, or what we do in our office, what is the position that we have in our office, and so on and so forth. And these two together comprise the obligatory duties that we are supposed to perform. And then Bhagavan introduces a wonderful concept, a very interesting concept called the Yajna spirit, the spirit of yajna, the spirit of cooperative endeavor, and explains how the spirit or with a spirit of service, performing all actions with a spirit of service without any motive of selfish gain, helps a human being achieve excellence and thereby achieve perfection. And he also describes the causal chain, how he has created this world and the causal chain. And this causal chain, Bhagavan says, establishes the cosmic order, and he cautions human beings not to be responsible for breaking this chain and thereby destabilizing the cosmic order. And to do a quick recap, the cosmic chain is that the beings, which means all living beings, Bhutani, all living beings, they come from food. Food comes from rain. Rain comes from yajna or sacrifice. Sacrifice comes from karma or action. And karma comes from the Vedas. And Vedas come from Brahma. And this is the cosmic chain. And Bhagavan says that when you are living in a world that has been established by this cosmic order, adopt the aspect of Loka Sangraham. Loka means world, Sangraha is collection. And how does a person, by doing Swadharma, hold the world together? Loka Sangraha means hold the world or the society together by what? By doing your Swadharma in an extremely excellent manner. That will then lead to the person being an inspiration or an ideal for others to follow. And when a human being does this, Bhagavan says that in addition to the nature, in addition to the cosmos providing you with all the benefits, the person gets inwardly benefited also in terms of Atma Tripti, Atma Rathi, and Atma Santushti. That is self-delight, self-satisfaction, and self-contentment. And continuing with this emphasis on why Arjuna should do Karma Yoga, he says, I do it too. Look at me. I do my duties. I perform my duties. And even if it means performing my duties as your charioteer, I do that. He says there is nothing in the three worlds that needs to be done by me. Yet I act ceaselessly, non-stop, without taking any break or rest. And if I do not do my duty in the form that I am in front of you, which is the avatar form, then there would be confusion of roles in the society. People would not know what they should do. And if I do not do my duty as Bhagavan, then there would be confusion of roles in the creation. And when that happens, entire creation, everything will perish. And Arjuna then asks Bhagavan the question that you have told me so much, Bhagavan, I understand, I get it, I am with you. But tell me, seems to be too many things for me. What all will I do? It's too confusing sometimes, it seems overwhelming at other times. Tell me that one thing, that one obstacle in my path, that one enemy, that if I handle that well, if I take care of that well, everything else will get taken care of. And to answer that, Bhagavan says that the single enemy, because of which humans are led to many pitfalls and lead a sinful life. Sinful life is nothing but a disturbed life, where there is disturbance within. That is nothing but desire. And initially when Bhagavan answers the question, he also as an afterthought adds anger to it. Anger follows through when desire is not fulfilled. So desire is the single biggest enemy. And he then says that even if the three elements of life that human beings have, the senses, the mind, and the intellect, even if they are quietened, but desire, which originates through the rasa, through the inherent tendencies, through the vasanas that have been cultivated over a period of time, if that is there, then that coming from nature, coming from the rasa, coming from the three gunas that we talked about, then the wisdom of how to do karma yoga will not arise. So it is important to what? Kill desire in the beginning itself, even before it enters the mind and intellect paradigm. Kill it as soon as you sense it. Do not wait. And then Bhagavan says that because of this reason, greater than the senses, the mind and the intellect, or more dangerous than the senses, the mind and the intellect, which depending on which way we look at it, is the desire that is born out of nature or the three gunas. And that is why it is the single biggest enemy. And because of this, take it out from the root. Do not wait for it to grow. We talked about the weed example in the last satsang. And then Bhagavan says, thus having known that desire is your single biggest enemy, establish yourself in the self by the self. Atmanam Atmana, in the self by the self. And then slay the enemy that is in the form of desire, Kama Rupena, which is otherwise very difficult to handle. Now coming to chapter 4, Bhagavan begins by establishing the glory of the knowledge in terms of why and how Karma Yoga should be performed. He does this because it gives clarity and it also includes the knowledge of the self. So Bhagavan says that doing such Karma Yoga takes into scope, takes into account performance of Jnana Yoga also. And that Jnana Yoga is preeminent in Karma Yoga. Bhagavan says that the performance of Karma Yoga in the prescribed manner leads to renunciation of karma in jnana, of action in knowledge. And he also in this chapter shares the Avatara Rahasya, which is the secret behind Bhagavan's incarnations. But before we dive into this chapter, let us understand, the concept of time and creation as it is explained in the Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana Dharma is the original name for Hinduism. A very, very interesting depiction and very scientific actually in nature. It is, I would encourage all of you to read it at your leisure. Very, very interesting. So as per Hindu mythology or Hindu cosmology, if I can use that term, Ayana refers to the course that the sun takes in the universe. And the 6 months that the sun moves towards the north are called Uttarayana. And the 6 months in which the sun moves southward are called the Dakshinayana. Uttarayana or the northern course begins from Makara Sankranti when the sun enters Capricorn in January. And Dakshinayana or the southern course begins in July on Shayana Ekadasi when the sun enters Cancer. The two ayanas together make one Varsha or 1 year. And 4,32,000 years make the Kali Yuga. We are now part of the Kali Yuga. 4,32,000 years make the Kali Yuga. Twice as much of the Kali Yuga, which is 8,64,000 years, make the Dwapara Yuga. And thrice as much as the Kali Yuga, which is 12,96,000 years, makes the Treta Yuga. And 4 times as much as the Kali Yuga, which is 17,28,000 years, is the Satya Yuga. And these 4 yugas together are called the Chatur Yuga or the Maha Yuga. That is the term by which the 4 yugas are referred to together, the 4 spans of time. And the 4 spans of time together make 4,320,000 years. 71 Chatur Yugas make one Manvantara. So 71 into 4,320,000 years is 30 crores 67,20,000 years. That is one Manvantara. Manvantara is the gap between 2 Manus. We will come to that in a little bit. 14 Manvantaras are said to constitute one single day in the life of the creator who is Brahma. This 14 Manvantaras, which is 1 day, is called Kalpa. And the Kalpa is the fundamental cosmic cycle in Sanatana Dharma. time is measured in the terms of this cycle or kalpa in Sanatana Dharma. It's a cosmic round, which comprise of what? The Mahayugas or the Chaturyugas. And the Mahayuga, Chaturyuga comprise of each of the 4 yugas. The notion of time in Sanatana Dharma is circular. It is not linear. Modern science, the notion of time is linear. But in Sanatana Dharma, it is circular. And because it is circular, or why it is circular so, is because the universe is considered to be in continual flow through these 4 periods of time. Now, according to modern science, there are 2 theories on creation and concept of time. I want to dwell a little bit to compare it with what modern science, what we just went through, and we'll come to what we just went through again. What modern science talks about in terms of creation and in terms of the concept of time. There are fundamentally 2 theories in modern science. The first one is called the steady state theory, which says that the universe is never born, the universe never dies, and it is always as it is, the way we witness it. However, that's not true, because the universe is in front of us constantly changing. In fact, a few years ago, they discovered one more planet in the solar system, which we didn't know existed earlier. It's changing, it's expanding, and there is scientific proof that this is happening so. So this theory, or the steady state theory, is not true. It is incorrect. The other theory is called the Big Bang theory, which is the most widely accepted and adopted by modern science. And the Big Bang theory says that the universe began with a point of energy exploding into what is called the Big Bang. And this theory says that the universe is anywhere between 11 to 20 billion years old as of today. So 11 to 20 billion, see, this is a 9 billion gap in between the two. 11 to 20 billion years old is what the Big Bang theory says. So the Big Bang theory essentially says that the universe itself popped out of nothing, and nothing caused the Big Bang. So Stephen Hawking, one of my favorites, as you all know by now, he says, and I'm quoting him, something very wonderful happened at the instance of the Big Bang. Time itself began. The gravitational field of the Big Bang is so powerful that it wraps not only light, that is why it's called the black hole, because light just gets into it. Okay, it wraps not only light, but also wraps time. Time does not exist inside the black hole, unquote. So he asks us to imagine, he presents this quite beautifully actually. He says, imagine a clock, and that clock is ticking, tuck, 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 like a clock ticks. And then the clock is getting sucked into the black hole, towards the black hole. As the clock gets closer and closer and closer to the black hole, he says it gets slower and slower and slower. And then let's imagine that it enters the black hole. So we said that the black hole gravitational pull is so huge that light and time also get, become zero. But imagine the clock survives, okay? Stephen Hawking says that if it gets into the black hole and survives, it stops. Not because it breaks. In our imagination, we are thinking that the clock does not break. Not because it breaks, but because inside the black hole, time does not exist. So Hawking says, and again, I'm going to quote him again, since time itself began at the time of the Big Bang, it could not have been caused or created by anyone or anything. So thus, for Hawking, it means that there is no possibility of a creator. That is why he is the famous scientist skeptic. However, he continues to say, we have this one life to appreciate the grand design of the universe. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. So as I'm listening to him, I'm thinking, grand design of the universe. Huh? So Hawking says, there is no time, there is no light, there is nothing. Nothing created the universe. So if nothing created the universe, there was no cause. When there is no cause, there is no creator. And then he says, grand design of the universe. And then he says, I'm extremely grateful for it. And I'm thinking, Hawking, Mr. Stephen Hawking, in your own words, grateful to who? To what? To nothing, to no one. Then that statement of Hawking is also zero, right? So again, one more interesting thing about modern science. Latest research shows that in this ever expanding, changing universe, it shows that it is much older than what was postulated by the Big Bang theory. Okay, the wide range of this 11 to 20 billion years is now being recalibrated. Initially, they said it was about 14.2 billion years old, and now, there is a lot more theory or experiments and discoveries and analysis that have showed that it could be much, much older. So, in short, modern man is not aware and has not been able to explain scientifically the creation of the universe. It's only a wonder. We can sit here in amazement and wonder how these ancient, Sanatana Dharma exponents, they put so much in detail in terms of creation, in terms of Brahma, and in terms of Vishnu, and in terms of, how time, the concept of time runs everything. It's amazing. So Vedic science, coming back to Vedic science says that the total age of the universe is 311.04 trillion years. Trillion. In human year terms, by the way, because in Vedic science, there is also a year of the Brahma. And the current age is around 155 big trillion years. And actually, when you do the calculation, which I'm not going to do today, it comes to 155.521972,944 trillion years. That level of accuracy. So it's quite amazing actually. But let us dwell on the calculation of the total, age of the universe, which is 311.04 trillion years. See, we talked about the Chatur Yugas. Chatur Yuga is what the 4 yugas put together, which is nothing but 4,320,000 years. This Kalpa, which we call Kalpa, the 4 yugas, the Mahayuga, which is the fundamental life cycle, is one day. We saw that, one day of the life of the Creator, Lord Brahma. And that is comprised of 1,000 Mahayugas. The one day of the Creator is comprised of 1,000 Mahayugas. So 4.32 million into 1,000 is 4.32 billion in human years. Lord Brahma's night, so we said this is the day. The night also is 4.32 billion years. And it is said in Sanatana Dharma that life exists during Brahma's day. The universe exists, its life is there, it functions, and so on and so forth, the way we know it. During Brahma's night, there is no life. And the age of the Brahma is said to be 100 years, each year having 360 days and 360 nights. So the total age of Brahma comes to 360 into 100 into 8.64 billion. That comes to 311.04 trillion human years. This period is called Mahakalpa. And this is the lifespan of the universe. So, very interesting concept. And the reason I dwelt on this, but not on the current age of the universe, is because this time span, or the Mahakalpa, is also said to be the duration of one breath of Lord Vishnu, Mahavishnu. When he exhales, the universe is born along with Brahma. And when Mahavishnu inhales, all of the universe gets sucked into Mahavishnu and Brahma dies. We will come to this later in Bhagavad Gita also. We will talk about Brahma's life span and all of that. Bhagavan talks about it. This cycle is non-ending. It is eternal. Unlike Hawking theory or the Big Bang theory, where inside the black hole time ends. As per Vedic cosmology, this is a non-ending eternal cycle. And it appears that there is a lot of calculation in this also, maybe a little bit more than modern science has managed to do till now. So as time progresses, now coming back to Vedanta, as time progresses from stage to stage, from yuga to yuga, the human society degrades. And why does it degrade? It degrades to a lower level. And at the end of that degradation, it culminates in the destruction of the existing order, which happens at the end of the Kali Yuga. So the 4 yugas, and at the end of the Kali Yuga, the existing order is destroyed. After this, the golden age or the blissful Satya Yuga recommences, starts again. This degradation in human society through the yugas happens due to progressive deterioration of dharma. We discussed dharma, in various contexts. We talked about dharma as righteousness. We talked about dharma as doing one's duty. We talked about dharma as pure essence of being. When we gave the example of fire, fire is hot. Without heat, there is no fire. The essence of being of anything, which makes the thing what it is. And we also spoke of dharma as the sacred truth. And a number of other things. I just covered a few of what we have spoken earlier. When this dharma deteriorates, the quality of moral standards and religious piety among human beings falls drastically. Bhagavan says, he will say a little later, we'll cover it in the next satsang. He says that he manifests when this happens. He comes into being when this happens. Each of these manvantaras is presided over by one Manu. And Manu, his sons who rule the earth, 7 sages, gods, and the king of gods or Indra, they all together preside over this manvantara. Manu himself is the progenitor. He is the one who forebears. He is the first man. And the Manu of our current, this time, is Vaivasvata Manu. The name of the current Manu, who is presiding over the current time in which we all live in, this Kali Yuga that we are part of, which is part of the Chatur Yuga, in which we are all living in. Now Bhagavan Sri Krishna, who is none other than Mahavishnu, he says, let's start with chapter 4.
Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha.
Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha.
Atha Chaturtho Dhyayaha.
Atha Chaturtho Dhyayaha.
Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yogaha.
Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yogaha.
Shri Bhagavanuvacha.
Shri Bhagavanuvacha.
Imam Vivasvate Yogam.
Imam Vivasvate Yogam.
Proktavanaham Avyayam.
Proktavanaham Avyayam.
Vivasvan Manave Praha.
Vivasvan Manave Praha.
Manurikshvaka Vibravita.
Manurikshvaka Vibravita.
Shri Bhagavanuvacha. Imam Vivasvate Yogam. Proktavanaham Avyayam. Vivasvan Manave Praha. Manurikshvaka Vibravita.
So Bhagavan says, Shri Bhagavanuvacha, the Supreme Lord, he says, Imam, this. What is this? What has been given to you now? In chapter 3, the knowledge of Karma Yoga. This yoga, and this yoga is what? Both Sankhya and Yoga. Aham Proktavan, I taught. Proktavan means Proktavan Prakashyena Uktavan iti Proktavan. Prakashyena means imparting it very well, extremely well. Like Bhagavan keeps saying, samachara. Whatever you do excellently. Devotion, with devotion and with excellent performance. So Bhagavan says, I did it excellently. I gave this knowledge in an excellent way. And what does that mean? In such a manner that no doubts remain. And comprising of both information and experiential wisdom. Informative knowledge and experiential wisdom. And comprising of both paroksha jnana and aparoksha jnana. What is heard and what is experienced. And who did I give it to in an excellent manner? Vivasvate. Vivasvate means to Vivasvan. Vivasvan is sun god, the sun. So please note that the sun represents life and divinity for planet Earth. For all of us. Without the sun, there is nothing. And Bhagavan says that in the very beginning, I gave this knowledge to the sun. Thus, he glorifies this knowledge. Glorifying is normally done to grab attention and followership. It's like, because this is mango season. By the way, it's still continuing mango season. The Imam Pasand mango. The very popular mango called Imam Pasand. Imam is who? Imam is the king. Pasand means favorite, like. The king loves the mango. So if the king loves this mango, all subjects are like, hey, the king loves it, so I must also get it. And that also means that that mango will be pretty rare. So like that, he glorifies this knowledge, that I gave this to the Sun Lord. And what kind of yoga did Bhagavan give to the sun? Avyayam. This has come earlier also, this word Avyayam. Avyayam means imperishable. Avyaya is something that does not decay. There is no decay. And why is this knowledge imperishable? Because of three reasons. Number one is it has its roots in the Vedas. The Vedas themselves are imperishable. Vedas, the other name for Vedas is Brahma. The vast Vedas are imperishable. The second is that this knowledge, it results in liberation, mukti. And that is also permanent, nitya. It's imperishable. And finally, it definitely gives the result. This level of certainty, this definitiveness, that also brings about the imperishability of this. So this Avyayam. And what did Vivasvan do with it? Vivasvan manave praha. Vivasvan taught it to Manu. We just talked about the concept of Manu. Manu is the one who presides over the Manvantara. And in this case, which Manu did Bhagavan Krishna teach it to? Vaivasvata Manu, who is the son of Vivasvan. And what did Manu do with it? Manu taught it to Ikshvaku. Manu Ikshvavake Bravit. And after Manu taught it to Ikshvaku, what happened after that? We'll go to the next verse.
Evam parampara praptam.
Evam parampara praptam.
Imam rajarshayo viduhu.
Imam rajarshayo viduhu.
Sakale neha mahata.
Sakale neha mahata.
Yogo nashta parantapa.
Yogo nashta parantapa.
Evam parampara praptam. Imam rajarshayo viduhu. Sakale neha mahata. Yogo nashta parantapa.
So Ikshvaku, Bhagavan said Manu gave it to Ikshvaku. Ikshvaku was one of the Raja Rishis. Raja Rishi means the royal sages. We'll come to that. So Bhagavan says in this verse, Imam parampara praptam. Thus, Imam, in this manner, this knowledge, imam, parampara praptam, spread through generations and generations. And the Raja Rishis, the Raja Shayo, the Raja Rishis, the royal sages, Ikshvaku and his descendants, and we talked about this earlier also, Ajatashatru, Janaka, people who were extremely well-read, who were also ruling over the land. So in those days, the sages and the kings were the same. What about them? Viduhu, they knew. Not only they knew, they attained mastery, and because they were also Rajas, they had the authority and influence. They knew, attained mastery on one side as sages, and as Raja had authority and influence. Hence Raja Rishis. And these are the people who received it and further disseminated it. And as long as this happened, it was going well. But however, over a period of time, what happened? Sri Ramakrishna says, as the shadow follows the substance, when the right type of humans become scarce, the right system dwindles away. The brighter the sun, the bigger the object, the bigger the shadow. And the shadow follows the substance. Similarly, when the right type of humans become scarce, the system also goes away. Nashtaha. So Bhagavan says, Kalena Mahata. In the course of time, Kalena Mahata, long time. We just went through. That is the reason why we went through the long time. It may have been a kind of a monologue, but this is the best we can do on Zoom. My request to all of you is, please go through this again. It is extremely interesting when you sit down, write it down, and understand what this means. How does it start? What are the 6 months? How does it evolve into Kalas through the Yugas? And how does it become the Mahakala? It's extremely interesting. So please do go through this. And Bhagavan says, Kalena Mahata. In the course of this long time, Sayogo, this yoga, Nashta, was lost. So the degradation of human society that we talked about through the yugas, that is the cause for this knowledge to get nashta. Why does that happen? Because this knowledge passes through unfit people. People who were either durbala. Durbala means weak mind and intellect. And Ajitendra. Jitendra means one who has conquered the senses. Ajitendra is one who has no mastery over the senses. Those are the people who received it as there was decay in society. And the recipients were unfit. The transmission was to unfit people. And when that happens, like Sri Ramakrishna says, what happens? The shadow follows the substance. It was lost. So knowledge and bhakti, they gain their value by the effect that they have on the person. If the person does not get transformed, then there is no use. Any knowledge, if I study to become a doctor or an engineer, and at the end of the day, I'm not able to perform a surgery if I study to become a surgeon, or if I'm not able to, design and build a house if I became a civil engineer, then that knowledge is suffering more than the individual. So the yoga itself suffers. And when that happens, organized religion holds sway. So in the Satya Yuga, there is no need for temples. There is no need for rituals. But as the society starts decaying in Kali Yuga, there is a need for temple and rituals. Mityachara. Remember what we said? Mityachara, giver, and a Mityachara, taker or receiver. People of, Bhagavan uses this term Mityachara, false conduct. And Bhagavan says, Nashta Parantapa. It got lost, O Parantapa. Note the use of the term or name Parantapa. for Arjuna here. Bhagavan has used this earlier also, this name for him. Parantapa means scorcher of enemies. Now Arjuna, what has happened? He has got deluded. And why has he got deluded? Because of Aham and Mama. And because he has got deluded, the yoga, and because the society has got degraded, the yoga has not been received properly by him up till now. And he now has to destroy these enemies, which are his inner enemies. Parantapa is Paran Shatrun Tapayati. Tapayati means burn in fire. Paran Shatrun Tapayati. One who scorches the enemy, both outer enemy and inner enemy. Arjuna is now facing the outer enemy, and there is an inner enemy that is working in him also. And what does Arjuna receive from Bhagavan? Bhagavan says that in the next verse.
Sa evayam maya tedya
Sa evayam maya tedya
yoga prokta puratanaha
yoga prokta puratanaha
bhaktosi me sakha cheti
bhaktosi me sakha cheti
rahasyam yetaduttamam
rahasyam yetaduttamam.
sa evayam maya tedya yoga prokta puratanaha bhaktosi me sakha cheti rahasyam yetaduttamam.
So what does this Arjuna, the Parantapa, what does he receive? Sa evayam yoga. That very same yoga. Which very same yoga? That Puratanaha yoga. That ancient yoga, the one that I gave to Vivaswan, the sun god, is what Bhagavan is saying. That very same yoga. Adhya, now, at this moment, today, you are receiving Arjuna. And what does it mean today? Today, when this parampara is broken, the lineage is broken. When the sampradaya has got nashta. At that time, he is receiving. Receiving what? The knowledge that Bhagavan gave to the sun god. Prokta maya te. Shared by me to you. Maya, by me, te to you, proktaha, I am sharing. And why am I sharing this to you, Arjuna? Bhakto si me cha sakha. Bhakto si me, you are my bhakta, you are my devotee. And you are also my friend, Sakha. So as a friend, Arjuna loves Krishna. It's very interesting and very, very relevant why Bhagavan says this. As a friend, Arjuna loves Krishna. And as one who has surrendered, if you remember 2.7, verse 2.7, right? As one who surrendered, it's already 5 o'clock, so I will not recite the verse. You please look up 2.7. As one who surrendered, after realizing his problems of Shoka and Moha, he has got the respect for Sri Krishna. So with love and respect, what happens? Devotion arises. With respect, one listens, and with love, one follows. One does not follow through respect or through instruction. One follows through love. Respect can be commanded, but love has to come from within. If you remember, Bhagavan said, Kim nigraha karishyati. How can we, put rules and regulations in place? There are no commandments. I can't give you a commandment. Not only do you respect me, you love me. You are devoted to me. That is why, Arjuna, I am sharing this to you. And because of this reason, I know that it will not get nashta, it will not get lost. You are a fit recipient. Only a fit recipient can do Guru Upasadana. And then he says, Hetad Uttam Rahasyam. this is the supreme secret. Uttamam Rahasyam or supreme secret. That does not mean that it should not be told, not be shared, or even if it is shared, it should be shared with only a select few. Doesn't mean anything. Even here, Bhagavan is saying to Arjuna, whoever in the battlefield wants to listen, you're welcome to listen. It's an open house, middle of the battlefield. Whoever, including Duryodhana, welcome to listen. Only organized religion does these control mechanisms. This is a secret, you are qualified, you are not qualified, who can listen, who cannot listen. But a secret is nothing but something that is hidden, which is unrevealed. Like you excavate and take out a town which existed millions of years ago. This is also unrevealed. As simple as that, just unrevealed. And when shared, it does not also imply that the secret would become common knowledge. That is because most people, either they are not interested, there is lack of interest, or lack of understanding. So even if somebody is listening to it, may or may not get that knowledge because of either lack of interest or understanding. For example, there is this current Indo-China standoff that's going on. I used to serve in the army, so I know that in these kind of situations, there are a lot of confidential, aspects that are in play. In fact, later on when I came into corporate world, because I had been privy to some of these at that time it was Indo-Pak mostly. Indo-China was very less, except once in my tenure, I didn't see an Indo-China turmoil. But these Indo-Pak secrets, they are confidential, extremely big. And in our day-to-day life, in our corporate world, people sometimes behave, like this is secret, and I'll be like, what secret? Is it Indo-Pak confidentiality? Forget it, share everything, right? So this lack of understanding, like this kind of Indo-Pak kind of thing, most people, even if they heard it, they will not get it. So it doesn't become common knowledge. Or for example, the latest invention of Google or SpaceX. We'll be interested, we'll see it, but will we get it? SpaceX now launched a rocket. How many of us know the science behind it? We may have seen the launch. I actually woke up at night to see the launch. I was very interested. But if you do a quiz on me, I will probably fail. So even when people listen, it does not stay. And this is that kind of a uttamam and that level of rahasyam. Now, the secrecy is maintained either because of selfishness, like I talked about, in the corporate world and so on and so forth, in our day-to-day life, okay? Or because it could cause harm if somebody knew it and abused it. These are the two reasons why a secret is maintained. The wisdom of yoga becomes obscure not because of these reasons. It is mainly because of what we talked about, the degradation of society. And because there is degradation in society, the number of competent people who know how to handle this yoga has dwindled. And because that has dwindled, and also because organized religion wants to control, they want to rule over other human beings through these instructions that they pass. Because of this has dwindled. A very interesting story about Swami Chinmayananda. Someone asked him once, you are giving away. Swami Chinmayananda was one who probably among the first teachers, first saints to bestow this knowledge in English. Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Chinmayananda, these are people who, so that common people of today understand. The language that unites India today is English. And number of people, this nashta knowledge had gone away. Sanskrit is not even in vogue today. It's very difficult for us to understand Sanskrit. So there are these great teachers who translated so that common people like all of us understand. And they preach, they write books, they preach, they're all available. And we are lucky because of them, we are able to learn. Otherwise, if you had asked me to read Bhagavad Gita in the original Sanskrit form, a lot of Tamil, I'm a Tamilian, but a lot of Tamil literature, I can't understand. I don't know Tamil. So I just don't know what it is. So it's an amazing thing that these saints have done. to have presented this in English for all of us to understand. So he was asked, why are you doing this? Why are you sharing this without proper selection to anyone? You are not looking at gender of the person. You are not looking at the caste, the creed, and you are just sharing. How do you know who is an adhikari and who is not? Who is authorized and who is not? So Swamiji responded, he said, don't you worry about it. Those who are fit will understand. Those who are not will go away. And this person who asked went away. And Bhagavan says, I am now sharing this to you, Arjuna, this wisdom. And Bhagavan saying this, that he gave this knowledge to Sun God, and now he's giving this knowledge, same knowledge to Arjuna, leads Arjuna to ask a question, which is the next verse.
Arjuna uvacha.
Arjuna uvacha.
Aparam bhavato janma.
Aparam bhavato janma.
Param janma vivasvataha.
Param janma vivasvataha.
Katameta dvijaniyam.
Katham etad vijaniyam.
Tvamadau proktavaniti.
Tvamadau proktavaniti.
Arjuna uvacha. Aparam bhavato janma. Param janma vivasvataha. Katameta dvijaniyam. Tvamadau proktavaniti.
Aparam bhavato janma. So Arjuna says, hey Bhagavan, hey Krishna, later was your birth. Param janma vivasvataha. And prior, a lot earlier was the birth of Vivasvan. Katham vijaniyam etad. How am I to understand what you are saying? Etad, this. Tvam proktavan iti adav. You taught this yoga in the beginning. You are standing in front of me, Bhagavan. I know you from childhood. We have played together. Now, Arjuna also knows Sri Krishna's amazing achievements, what all he has done, But he also is his friend, Sakha. You yourself just called me Sakha. We have played so far together. You grew up in front of me, and you are telling me you taught Sun God. So this question lays the context for Bhagavan to explain the philosophy of Avatara, the Avatara Rahasya. The secret behind Nirguna and Saguna. Nirguna means without gunas, Saguna means with gunas. And how the Nirguna appearing as Saguna, the one without guna, the element without guna, appears as an element with guna, visible, perceivable to all the jivas. That Avatara. This concept of this Avatara is unique to Sanatana Dharma. Most of the philosophies, in fact, all other philosophies in the world talk about Son of God, Messenger of God. Sanatana Dharma is God. Lord Rama is God, Lord Krishna is God. This question by Arjuna is an intelligent question, is the question of an intelligent student. He is not one of those non-believers that Bhagavan talked about in chapter 3. And why is that of an intelligent student? It's a higher order question. Arjuna knows that there is some greater depth into what Bhagavan is saying, and he wants to understand this. An intelligent question. And we'll see how Bhagavan in the rest of the chapter answers it, but we will quickly finish the other two verses also that we have slated for today. Sri Bhagavanu Vacha.
Sri Bhagavanu Vacha.
Sri Bhagavanu Vacha.
Bahuni me vyatitani.
Bahuni me vyatitani.
Janmani tava charjuna.
Janmani tava charjuna.
Tanyaham veda sarvani.
Tanyaham veda sarvani.
Natvam veta parantapa.
Natvam veta parantapa.
Sri Bhagavanu Vacha. Bahuni me vyatitani. जन्मानि तव चार्जुना तान्यहं वेद सर्वाणि न त्वं वेत्त परन्तप.
Bahuni. Bahuni means many. Janmani me. Many births of mine. Vyatitani have passed. Tava cha. Yours too. Cha is end. And, A-N-D, and. And here refers to all beings. So, I, you, all beings have had many births, O Arjuna. And he says, Aham Veda, I know. Tani Sarvani, them all. I know about all my births. I know about all your births. I know about all the births of all the beings. Tvam Vetana, you know not. How is that possible? That's possible because you, Arjuna, and all the beings, you all take embodiments based on your punya and papa. All the beings also take their embodiments, respective embodiments based on their punya and papa. And if you remember what we said, punya and papa, the disturbances and lack of disturbances. So I read this in Quora, in this internet question thing called Quora. There's a question that says, does Bhagavan have karma? And the answer is yes, Bhagavan has karma. And the example given for the answer was, as Rama, Bhagavan killed Vali. Vali had done no harm to Bhagavan, okay, in the avatara form or in any other form for that matter. But Bhagavan killed Vali. And because Bhagavan killed Vali, when he came as Krishna, Vali took a rebirth at that time. And in that Janma of Vali, he killed Bhagavan Krishna. So it was a very interesting story. However, Bhagavan does not have any karma. Simply because his embodiment is not based on karma. There is no cause and effect for him. Bhagavan will talk about karma later again in the Bhagavad Gita. We have to be patient. There is no cause and effect for Bhagavan. So Bhagavan now says, how does he take embodiments? Bhagavan explains in the next verse.
Ajopi sannavyayatma
Ajopi san vyavayatma
bhutanamishwarupi san
bhutanamishwaropi san
prakritim swamadhisthaya
prakritim swamadhisthaya
sambhavamyatma mayaya.
sambhavamyatma mavaya
Ajopi sannavyayatma bhutanamishwaropi san prakritim swamadhisthaya sambhavamyatma mayaya.
Ajopi san vyayatma ajaha san api avyayatma san api. Ajaha san api, even though unborn, yet I am coming into being. Avyayatma san api, even though unperishable, yet coming into being. Unborn and unperishable, yet I come into being. Even though there is no birth and even though there is no death for me, I take birth in a physical form. Bhutanam Ishwaropi san. And I do this because I need to incarnate as the Lord of all beings. And I told you, Bhagavan will say why he needs to incarnate. We'll come to that in the next satsang. I incarnate as the Lord of all beings. Adhishtaya. Adhishtaya means employing. I employ. I use. Adhishtaya. Swam prakritim. So Bhagavan is saying, how do I do that? While you all do that based on your karma, I employ my own nature. Swam prakritim. Sambhavami, I am born. Atma mayaya, by my own free will. Employing my own nature, I am born by my own free will. So we shall delve deeper into how Bhagavan uses his own free will and his own nature to take a physical form, and when all he chooses to do so in the next satsang. Thank you. Hari Om.
Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.
So as I had mentioned in between, request you all to go through the concept of time creation, both in terms of modern science and in terms of Vedic cosmology. There's a lot of reading material available. If anyone is interested, I can suggest, but I mean, you can, in fact, you can just Google. There's so much available on the net also. Hari Om, thank you. Any questions, thoughts, comments?
So I just want to know that, okay, we try and understand the concept of the time that is mentioned in Gita. How is it relevant to us today? I mean, what do we understand out of it, or how does it make sense for us in today? I mean, we understand, okay, it is there, that is how it is. But what do we learn? What do we understand?
So the reason I spent some time in the introduction to explain that was, Bhagavan talks about Manu. I gave it to Vivaswan, Vivaswan gave it to Manu. So I wanted to have a background. I wanted all of us to get that background of what does it mean when you say I gave it to Vivaswan, Manu. Vivaswan, okay, I get it, son. Ikshvaka also, I get it, one of the old kings. Who's this Manu? Okay, so Manu is the presider of that Manvantara. Manvantara actually means Manu Antara. The gap between two Manus is Manvantara. So when you find out who is Manu, then you know, there's all this wealth of information comes up. That is one first concept. The other, my mother is also saying there's something called Manu Smriti, Manu Dharma Shastra. Okay, yes, it will be very interesting to read that up also. So, but in this case, Bhagavan uses the term Manu, and he says, I gave it to Vivaswan, Vivaswan gave it to Manu, Manu gave it to the kings, and it spread through generations, parampara. That one link, every other thing we normally understand, right? But Manu, it was not very clear. So, and we all, most people, when we read, the question is, who is this Manu? Vivaswan's son, we all get it. Ikshvaka is a king, the oldest among the old kings, we all get it. And through parampara it came, that also we get. The Manu is the question mark, right? So that was one reason, right? And the other reason is that I got, like I told you earlier, also I quoted Stephen Hawking. There's a lot of very, very interesting modern science work that is going on, you know. This theory of the black hole. And there is no time in black hole, there is no light in black hole. Our Vedic cosmology says it very differently, and there's a lot of similarity, but there is a lot of difference too. It's circular. Time is circular concept. In science, it is a linear concept. You keep going towards the black hole till it becomes non-existent. There is no time. So yes, it is. It brings into relevance. We are learning Bhagavad Gita, right? And when you're learning Bhagavad Gita, it brings into relevance all of these aspects.
Srini, this is Panduranga here.
Hello, Panduranga.
Yeah, I have a query. See, while maybe it didn't get covered today, I'm not sure if it is there in the Gita. With respect to this time, since Vishnu is the creator of the whole universe or whatever you want to define. Are there living beings only on earth, or is there a mention that there is some other place where there are people or there are living things present, or is it just only earth where it is there?
So Brahma is the creator, not Vishnu. But there is mention of lokas, right? The heavens or the Swargaloka where the Indra and the gods live. That is one loka. There is mention of the Bhuloka, which is the earth. There is mention, but nowhere is it said that the Bhuloka is the only place where human beings live. And there is also mention of the Naraka. So there are different classes of existence and life that is mentioned. And yes, there are lokas that are mentioned. So we need to study more in detail. Even I have not done that level of detailed study to share with you exactly where these lokas are. But yes, in our scriptures, these lokas are mentioned.
Yeah, so I know. So there is this Swargaloka and Patal Lok, and the general story I've always been told is Patal Lok is something below the surface of earth, okay, and Swargalok is somewhere up in the sky. But there again, in context of humans and the gods which we believe and pray. But apart from human race, is there anything else, or it's just not mentioned anywhere?
From what I know, these are the three, like Asuras or the Daityas is it's not a human race. The Asuras and Daityas are not human race. And it's not like they are under the earth or anything like that. I think it's to signify what is above, what is below, or what is more evolved and what is less evolved. Which is the race that is more dependent on Rajas, and which is the race that is more dependent on Tamas. Which is the race which is more dependent on Tamas, and which is the race which is more dependent on Sattva. The Devas are more Sattvic, the Asuras are more Tamasic compared to the Manushya. This is what I am aware of. I have not read any other form of life.
Okay. Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Yeah. So, you also mentioned that the time as a concept is circular, in the sense the same thing probably happens after whatever number of years. So, at times it happens to me, I'm sure it happens to many other people. You suddenly get a feeling that deja vu, oh, this happened sometime and it's repeating again. So is this probably because the time is circular and it would have happened whatever yugas before it would have happened to you and it's happening again? Is that why the deja vu thing happens?
Absolutely. I think circle within circles. So within our lifespan, there are circles. So there could be deja vu. Within our multiple lifespans, there is deja vu. I've heard of stories where it's not just deja vu. There are people who have actually remembered specific details which have been verified about their previous births. There is scientific study today that shows that. So that is actually more than deja vu. Deja vu is a feeling within, that feeling of familiarity within. But I have heard of actual instances where it is bigger than a deja vu, where it is reality. So yes, it is because of the circular concept, is what I would say. I kind of believe that. There is also this other aspect when you read or when you study any subject. Sometimes you feel that you've never studied it before, you've never read it before, but when you're reading it, you feel that sense of it's very familiar. I knew it. There are prodigies today. To take the argument further, someone who is not a child that has never touched a violin is able to pick up the violin and play like a master. Some familiarity from some other, it's more than deja vu. It is, it's actually something that is familiar, that we know about, even though we have never learned or we have never read. So those aspects also come because of the circular nature.
Yeah, thanks.
Srini, I would like to answer here something on the lokas. I had read that there are 14 lokas. Firstly, thank you for your session. I had read that there are 14 lokas, 7 above the earth and 7 below the earth. But there are various legends to it, because if you go the ISKCON route, these people believe that the end loka is the Goloka. They say Goloka is the end loka. But whereas some Hindu legends say that Saket Loka is the ultimate loka. So there are various legends to all of it. But I do not have much clarity, but I had read it somewhere that the 7 above are called Vyahartis, and the 7 below the earth are called the Narkas or the Patal Lokas. So under Patala also there is a, Vitala, Sutala, all these are 7 lokas in the Patala and 7 above, like Bhu, Bhuvas and all that. But there's various, a lot of reading required there. So I am not competent enough to give more knowledge, but there are 14 I had read somewhere.
That's true. Yes, even I've heard of them, and when you recite some of the shlokas when you're doing rituals, the names of these come up, but I have not dwelt into those. Maybe in due course we can. Those
Yeah,
of us.
and even in when you chant like my mother and father are a lot into the Gayatri, Homa and Yagya. So they say Om Bhuvaha, Om Bhuvasaha. So these are, I guess there it comes. The I don't know what is the exact link which follows, but definitely the chants and the hymns that we do are a depiction of the bigger sciences that kind of manifest. It's all linked, but it requires a lot of reading to gather that link.
That's true. Actually, all of this comes, some of the aspects that we went through today, the Manvantras, all of those also come. The Kala, the Manvantara, all of that also comes. So, yes, there is a lot more to Vedic cosmology. Vedic science is a deep, deep subject, which is, like Bhagavan says, has got lost. Some of it is being revived. Some of it probably will be revived only when the Satya Yuga comes back. All of it would be revived only when the Satya Yuga comes back. But that's what it is. And like you said, different people are saying different things. So you don't know what the real is, what the truth is. Because the society has got degenerated, because there are so many different views of the same aspects of, Vedic cosmology, the same aspects of Vedanta. Everybody is preaching their own things. So yes, that's how it gets lost. So probably, in Satya Yuga, it'll all come back.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to learn and know, extremely interesting.
Yes, definitely. As a child, like mom, because I had a family background wherein a lot of these shastras used to be recited as a child. So I used to know that there is a Shir Sagra, or the ocean of milk, which is like the pinnacle of the place where the god resides. God Vishnu resides. But then I got introduced to ISKCON, wherein they started talking about the Goloka, and they say that is superior to the Shir Sagar. So that is where it all kind of mingled in the head.
Yeah. Any other questions, thoughts, or comments? Okay, if nothing else, then Hari Om. We will continue with the satsang coming Saturday.